This is the final entry in a 3-part series on how to get better at Smash Bros. If you somehow ended up here without seeing the first couple vids, you can find links in the description. These final few tips are going to be a bit more removed from the game. You won't actually be pressing buttons for a good majority of them. They're much more focused on information gathering and altering your mindset when you're not in an active match, so you'll be ready to play once the game begins proper. Hopefully that doesn't come across as needlessly convoluted. Number 15. Keeping a big picture mindset. Your goal in a game of Smash is to win the round. That's obvious and doesn't really need saying, but if that's the phrasing in your head, then it'll affect the way you play. Your objective shouldn't just be to win the fight that you're in right now, but every fight that comes after as well. If you rely on techniques that hinge on your opponent's ignorance, then you're just setting yourself up to get hard countered the moment they identify the problem. You have to mix up your game so that tech is just one of many tools. That way, it'll work more often. Now, obviously, consistently blocking every attack is going to be very difficult, and you're for sure going to run into problems where you encounter something you don't know how to counter. That's when you're going to need to learn the most important information gathering technique of all. Number 16. Complaining on the internet. Like many things, there's a right and a wrong way to being unhappy on the web, and since everyone gets really passionate about video games, you're going to need to post defensively. Your goal when complaining shouldn't just be to let off steam. You want to know what you're doing wrong, and you want to know an easier way to counter whatever threat you're dealing with. It's important to phrase your question as a question, and not just internet yelling. If you lose focus on why you're upset, you're just going to end up in an internet argument with some rando, and that gets us nowhere. Not all answers are going to be satisfying though, and you might just find you need a different tool for the job. Number 17. Matchup awareness. People get really attached to their mains since they spend so much time working on them, but it can lead to needless struggles when all you need to do is use a different tool for the job. I mean, you can use a hammer to paint a wall, I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying that there's a million dudes, you could just pick 2 of them. Sometimes you just have a bad matchup and you need to take a counter pick. Ideally, you could just have a diverse portfolio, but since people tend to pick characters with similar playstyles, it might just be best to see what players who main the character you're struggling against have trouble with themselves. Avoid tier lists when you can, and focus more on matchup charts. Just keep in mind that those are built around the top of the meta, and if you're not there yet, you might just want to find some new tech for your main. Number 18. The short hop shortcut. Here's a little factoid I forgot to mention in the previous vid, so I'm putting it here instead. Did you know that inputting attack and jump at the same time is a shortcut for a short hop attack? That's going to be super useful now that everyone has less landing lag, and you can even use it as a shield. That means you can avoid those few extra frames that got added when you stopped blocking. Just make sure that you don't accidentally input attack plus shield, because then you'll end up with a grab. Number 19. Learning to learn your opponents. No matter how good you are at a game, there's a limit to how quickly your body can react to a move's startup. That's where reads come in, where you can predict what your opponent's going to do before they do it. You should look for patterns in places where your opponent has limited options, because they'll often favor a few of the same bad habits. The most telling part of any player's style is how they deal with the iframes after taking or losing a stock. Usually folks will just play keep away when you respawn, but some less experienced players will just try and roll behind you. That can be easily punished with a reverse or down smash. When you're respawning, you can pressure your opponent into jumping by feinting a dash grab and then using an anti-air. Other good places to watch your opponent's pattern could be after special grab moves like Ganon's side special, or how they tech after being knocked back onto the stage, since these are great places to set up resets and vortexes. Number 20. Learning to learn when you've been learnt. As fun as landing a read can be, it can be just as easy to shut down after getting read yourself. When your opponent is in your head, you have to, first of all, obviously mix up your game, and then ideally find a way to throw in some feints. When you have a move hard countered, it's usually because your opponent has identified one of your patterns, so if you can manage to emulate yourself and then counter their counter, you can reflip the momentum back into your favor. If you're lucky, you can repurpose that old pattern as a mix-up for later, though eventually your opponent will learn how to optimize that in their favor as time goes on. Of course, this assumes you're playing the same matchup with the same opponent over and over, and when you try a 10th level mind game on a different player, you may just end up looking like an idiot. When that happens, you need to start guiding them into bad habits that you can capitalize on. But that does bring up a major factor of what makes fighting games so hard. How are you supposed to be the best if you can only play so many people? Number 21. Going fucking outside. Between 100 characters and million billion players, there's an exponential number of ways to play the game, and the best way to beat them is to know what it's like to play them. That means if you're going to improve, you're going to have to leave the basement and find new players and playstyles to play against. That way you can deconstruct their strategy, develop some counters, and store them in memory, because you're going to need that info the next time you play that type of matchup. It's better to be aware of what you're up against before you get hit with it. That's what the top level meta is. Being aware of what your opponent wants to do, being aware of how they want to do it, and being aware that they're aware of what you want to do and how you want to do it. If you want to improve at Super Smash Bros., then you should understand the intricacies of neutral and defensive play. You should master your mobility tools and your controls. You should make adjustments and adapt to failure. You should have a defensive and a big picture mindset. You should learn to use the game socially, and you should play the video game in a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different people IRL. That's as condensed as it gets. Now all you gotta do is do it.